Come down. Ooh, you make my high come down. Always tripping when you come around. Never have to cut you out like right now. You see, I don't have to drive me. You can say that for your mama. Maybe you should smoke some. Me try to marijuana. I was never you good. The vibe was straight. Showed you a couple of things and they feel strange. I treated you right. Everything was a gift from a time to your bag and the color on your lip.
Welcome to the Seahawks Band and Man podcast, powered by Blue Wire. Shout out to the new company. My name is Michael-Shawn and You guys can follow me on whatever Elon Musk is calling that app these days. My @ name has not changed. It's also right under my chin. For everyone watching on YouTube, at Mike Dugar, MikeDugar. Shout out to everyone who is either watching or listening via our YouTube channel. Seahawks Man to Man is the name of the channel. That is Seahawks Man, the number 2 man. Make sure you like and subscribe there. Also follow us on Instagram, Seahawks Man to Man, TikTok, Seahawks Man to Man. All the handles are the same consistently for you guys. Appreciate the love and support. Even if you're someone who consumes on an audio platform, just doing all those things I just said means a lot to us. So thank you. Chris, go ahead and talk to him.
What is going on, everybody? It's your boy, Christopher Kidd. You can follow me on Blue Sky and Twitter at CKIDD206, and that's CKid206.
All right, welcome back, folks. Been a little bit. I don't think we've talked since Kubiak got introduced. Yeah, I don't think we have. I haven't talked since the Super Bowl with you guys. And John Schneider decided to help us out with some offseason content by kicking off his John Schneider show that he does on the radio. He's going to do it every Thursday afternoon. Good for him. He did the first one over on 710. And Chris, I love when John talks. It's very helpful because he doesn't know how to lie, and he hasn't gotten any better at it. He's been doing this for a while now. He's been I think he got his first gig with the Packers as like an unpaid intern in like 91 or 92 or something like that. So he's been in this business as long as literally me and you have been alive, and he still doesn't know how to lie, which is great. Great for us. Probably not great for the fans, but great for us in the content space. And I bring up John because his appearance on his John Schneider show, where that was his first time talking since the season has ended, and that I think that's intentional. They didn't do like a postseason wrap up thing and hasn't really done much else, right? Because again, doesn't know how to lie. And I thought he gave some great truths in this show. And so the first one I want you guys to hear is John was asked, and make sure I get the question. The question's long-winded, but I thought it was pretty cool. John was asked if his philosophy has morphed at all now that he's the head honcho, so to speak. You know, no Pete having a higher title than him. So has your philosophy changed or morphed and how you go about building the team? And here is John's answer to that question.
But philosophically, no, not really. You know, we know exactly what our deficiencies are. It's, you know, we can all see it, right? Mm-hmm. And we're like, we have a plan to address everything. Part of the acquisition part also is like, okay, what's the buy-in then with everybody so you can develop guys? You have to be a strong developmental team. When you get back to Philly, they've done a great job. Their offensive line coach is a really good coach, been there for a long time, and they've done a really nice job getting player acquisition and developing there. And that's what we need to improve on. We need to improve our ability to identify and develop, because it's like, it's 50% both ways, and you have to be able to develop these guys. So, yeah, I mean, the philosophical part is really like running the ball. How do we run the ball? How do we play, super fast here at the coolest stadium in the National Football League, where guys can just get ripping off the ball? That stuff is all stay the same.
In that video, by the way, that you guys saw, it's obviously 710's video. By coming at us, but anyway, Chris. He almost did it there. He almost basically just said, "Hey guys, our O-line stink." Did you catch that?
Yeah, he was this close, and then he probably heard one of our favorite guys saying, "Don't you say that. Keep going." In his ear. I don't know if he's wearing an earpiece with headphones on.
I don't think he is, but yeah.
Jokingly, he definitely was very close to saying, our O-line stinks. And he'd be like, "Yeah, John, I'm glad you said that out loud, man. You're a man. Good job." But he didn't. He said, "We all know what our issues are, deficiencies. We get it." And then we knew what he was talking about. Everyone knew. So that was
Well, then
funny.
he brings
indeed.
up Philly's O-line, where it's like, oh, okay, so you're not even going to hide it now. Now you're just going to bring up the O-line. That's the only thing he brought
Yep.
up with the Eagles. Their whole team is loaded, but he's like, you know what? Their O-line, I thought that was actually very insightful. And that's an example of just not really knowing how to lie. Because if he had just left it at, we know what our deficiencies are, then you could be like, oh, well, we don't know what he's talking about,
Right.
you know? Yeah, whole team has a bunch of issues. But then you'd be like, well, look at Philly's O-line. We got to develop. And I know we're joking about him lying and telling the truth, but he's obviously right. But the important part, I think, is not the copying of Philly per se, because you look at how their team was constructed outside of Jordan Mailata. I think it's all first and second round guys. Like that's how they entered the league, whether through with Philly or another means, which I think like Mekhi Becton was a first round pick, but then obviously got signed in free agency. But beyond copying Philly, I thought, Chris, the important part, there's two important parts. One, John basically has been getting cooked amongst his fans, probably some of his peers too, for saying that interior offensive linemen, particularly guards, are overdrafted and overpaid, right? Like because that was terrible, right? And that's a philosophy thing that he believes. Clearly, that has not changed. Then when he says philosophically, now he wasn't asked directly about that, and he probably will be at the combine. But I think that part, I take that answer to say, oh no, it has not. I still believe that. And here's why I still believe that, because not only do you have to, you got to sign him in free agency, but you also got to be better at, and this is what he mentioned, he said the ability to identify and develop, because it's 50% both ways. Now, when he said identify, he didn't say the word talent, but I'm assuming that's what he means, obviously. So identify talent and develop that talent. That means find the diamonds in the roughs, the Jordan Mailata, who I think was a 6th or 7th round pick, and then develop those guys, but then identify a Cam Jurgens, who I think was a 2nd round pick, or identify a Lane Dickerson, who I 2nd or 3rd or something like that. So identify the talent and develop them late guys. He's right about that. And it's just like, well, I wish, this is what sucks that John doesn't talk to us, because we need to get John on the show. That would be great. He won't do it, but I'll keep asking until they eventually agree. But it's just like, the follow-up there, what I would have loved is when he said we need to improve our ability to identify and develop, right? Okay, cool. What has gone wrong to this point? I would love a very honest answer to like, okay, where has the issues come in the talent identification? And that's important, because then you need to tell me, how's it going to change? If you just tell me, oh, we just got to be better identifying talent. Well, you've been the GM since 2010. So like I need to know, and you haven't fired a bunch of people and overhauled your scouting department to our knowledge. So what is going to change? Like, how are you going to be better at that? Is it because of Clint? Is it because of some past mistakes with where you've crossed guys off because of medical, or because of measurements, or because of where they played, or maybe you've overvalued guys because of where they played? It's like, oh, he's a big guy, played in Alabama, so he's good. But he ends up not being any better than a guy who played at UTEP, or whatever, I would love to have John go into that. Maybe he can't, but I do feel like that is the logical follow-up to that. It's just like, oh, we got to be better. Well, duh. How are you going to do that, man? You got people paying a lot of bread for these season tickets and investing in your team. They want to know how you're going to be better. I wish we could have got that, but I do think it was important that he mentioned that. And then, Chris, the other thing, which is probably bad news for the fans that stood out, is the insistence on the development part that he keeps mentioning, that Mike Macdonald has mentioned now too. Like, we got to develop these guys. That tells me probably that, we'll get into this with some of the questions people sent in to us, they're probably not going to be spending big on O-line this offseason. It probably means that they're looking at Sautawa, who's under contract for 3 more years, Anthony Bradford, who's under contract for 2 more years, Christian Haynes under contract for 3 more years, Olu under contract for 2 more years. Probably looking in the room and being like, we need to get one of these guys to hit, preferably 2. But if we can just get one, we're in a good spot. Like, we need to make these guys good, or bring out the best out of them, however they're looking at it. And Chris, that's probably the reality, but the fans are probably hearing that like, okay, yeah, here we go again. We're screwed.
No, I would say, based on what we just listened to, that's exactly the plan moving forward. Doesn't mean that they won't try to go out and get someone, because they can definitely try. Things have to work out. Money's got to be right. Fit's got to work out. And the agent's got to tell the player, hey, this is what they're offering. What do you say? If that works out, maybe the Seahawks do hit. But the idea is, okay, as Mike mentioned, there's guys that they can work with. One guy that I'm interested to see improvement from is Sautau Lumea. I think he is someone that is very intriguing because he had a few instances last season where he was really good. I was like, okay, there's something that can work with that. And I'm sure Mike Macdonald watched the film and said, okay, this is a piece that if we can make him an all-pro, oh my gosh, all-pro guard, and we have Charles Cross that takes the next step. Abe Lucas is healthy for a season. That's 3 solid linemen right there. Maybe you can get an okay center and find your left guard, and he's okay too. Are we talking about a playoff team? I would dare say yes. Based on that right there and there, Saltel becomes the all-pro guy that the Seahawks need in 2-3 seasons, maybe even next year. So that is one piece that I'm like, okay, I understand that process, but then I also think back to the idea of, well, this is the same John Schneider that said 2 years ago, this is a Super Bowl team. So now they're not a Super Bowl team, and now you're just looking to just build pieces. So where is this team right now? Is it a Super Bowl team or a playoff team that can get in there and you never know what happens? That is a question that I'm curious to hear him say, because I think that changes how you attack the offensive line. If you're just a team that's like, oh, yeah, we get in and we'll see what happens. Okay, I understand development. But if you're saying, oh, this is a Super Bowl roster, then I don't think you can necessarily go out and just say, hey, we have to do it within, because now there's a time frame of when you can do this. If you're a Super Bowl team, it's kind of this season. You're not looking on for the next year. It's not guaranteed. Look at the Lions, right? Unfortunately, they just had a litany of injuries, but their O-line was stacked. The D-line was stacked until injuries, and their secondary improved. They weren't thinking, you know what, we're a decent playoff team. We got a decent O-line. We're not going to go out and do A, B, and C. They went out and did all of those things. It's just they got unlucky. So when I look at the Seahawks, they need to I want to know where John Schneider sees this team. 2 years ago, oh yeah, Super Bowl contender. We should be right there. Didn't happen. Okay. A few years later, where you at, John? That's what I want to know now. Where does he see this Seahawks team?
Yeah, I can't wait to talk to him at the combine, assuming that he will. He needs to, because these are important questions, man. How does he see? I think he sees the team as a contender, to your point, but I need to hear him say it sometimes. He said it last offseason, at the owners' meeting. So I just want to hear him say it again, because that sets the foundation for how you judge the team. Everyone likes to point to, for some reason, like Vegas win totals, like, oh, they thought we'd win 7.5. We won however many, so we had a good year. It's like, bro, people in the buildings, whether you're the Patriots last year or the Chiefs this year, no one in these buildings cares about what Vegas said you were gonna. That's like good, like for like a few tweets here and there, but in the building, no one gets to keep their job because you won more than Vegas thought. For real, it's just your boss sets the expectation. If your boss
Mike,
says
you got 10 wins, man. We're gonna throw another 7 years on that contract, man. That was incredible. Great job.
And then it's like doing that because Vegas thought we went 5.5. It's like, who cares? And like, I wouldn't say who cares, because there is a section of the world that does care a lot about what Vegas thinks. But that's not how people get hired and fired and retained and promoted, by Vegas win totals or what they are like. It's good to dunk on like a columnist who predicts you go 4-12 or whatever, but that's not really what keeps you. That's not what matters. I should say that. So I want to play to cue up the second clip from John in that same interview. It was interesting for a separate reason. So in this one, the question was, are there some positions that are better to address in free agency versus the draft? And the person asking the question kind of prefaced it with, looking specifically at the O-line. Like, is that a position where you would rather get a veteran with experience or go get into the draft where you can get a young guy and develop him and hope he pops later?
It changes every year by position except for the offensive line.
Okay.
Because everybody's on this constant quest for offensive linemen and developing offensive linemen. And I mean, you brought up the Super Bowl. We just saw what happened in the Super Bowl, for crying out loud. Like they're playing for a world championship, and things didn't go well. So every team, everybody you talk to, it's kind of like, and so I would say yes to answer your question. Every position changes every year based on depth, but the offensive line there's always like this dearth of talent at the position. So supply and demand, right? So. But there's, everybody's when you talk to other teams, when you talk to other GMs about trades and stuff like that, or our guys upstairs talking to other teams, everybody kind of like skips the offensive line because it's like just a given. You know what I mean? Like everybody's looking for him.
I love that. I imagine everybody just like, yeah, no, man, don't call me about my right tackle, bro. You can't have my right tackle. I need my right tackle. I don't just got extra right tackles laying around, left guards, whatever. And on the back end of that quote, there's a longer part of it, but I wanted to read because John rambles for a little bit there. But he also said, and I quote, "For agency, you can't just throw money at something to fix a perceived need. We've made mistakes there in the past, and we're going to try not to repeat the mistakes we've made." End quote. Because that was another great, not to just pick at the interviewers, because I think Bob and Dave generally do fine. It's the flagship station, whatever. But just like Chris, that was another instance where I was like, "Ooh, okay, let's unpack that, John. What about that was a mistake? When did you make that mistake? How long ago? Because John generally, if we just look at just the old line, he hasn't like thrown a lot of money at the problem. It's been a problem for like a decade, and his answer has legitimately not been to throw money at it. Unless you count like Luke Jokel getting $7 million as quote unquote throwing money at the problem. I wouldn't call that a 1-year deal for $7 million for a guard throwing money at the problem. Like even Gabe Jackson's deal, which I think was like 3 years, 22 million or something total. I don't think that's necessarily throwing money at the problem. Does John think that was? Because that was a trade, not necessarily free agency. I don't know how he views that, because he's not out here just buying guards. He's not out here buying linemen, tackles even, like Dwayne Brown was a trade. Does he consider, I would have loved to hear more about that process as well, because that's important too, because he's right. You can't just buy, if you're just looking at specifically at linemen, you can't just buy a new O-line every year when your O-line sucks. If that was the case, more teams would do it. They would tack on void years, go get the biggest free agents, have the owners eat the dead money if it needed to be in the void years or the contracts, and then just go. Let's get the best line possible. It doesn't work like that, and that's important. And as we've talked about in this offseason, Chris, because there's a lot of teams that need offensive linemen, and there's just not a lot of fat dudes out there that can move, like just in America. That's like legitimately the problem with I'd say the problem with the NFL, but that is a problem with team building right now. You have this weight minimum, which is you think about it, like very few sports have this like weight minimum. Like, hey man, I need you to be 300 pounds before I even consider employing you. That's kind of nuts. Just starting there, you have to be 300 pounds. You also have to be a certain height, right? Like, I'm probably capping it. What's the shortest low lineman you could probably be? Like
6'3"?
Well, what was Puna? 5'10"?
Oh, you're
Would you
talking
make
about
Puna?
okay.
No. I'm talking about lineman, but Puna's
Probably
like 5'10".
5'11", 5'10".
Yeah, like maybe a guy like Puna could be your center, something like that. How tall is Olu? Let's see how tall Olu is. Olu's 6'3", that's a big dude. Yeah, so you actually no, you're probably right. It's probably something 6+. So like you just start with that baseline. I need you to be 6 foot, let's say 6'1". I need you to be 6'1", 300 pounds, and athletic. You're cutting off just a bazillion kids right there, because kids that are that size, they are Jalen Carters.
Right.
If they're going to be 6'1", 6'2" with long arms and athleticism, they're going to be Jalen Carters, which is actually funny, Chris. I've been thinking about that sometimes. That is the context in which he said the overdrafted and overpaid thing. He was talking like that, and then he said that line, and it was just like final last words. But yeah, the important part, I think why I wanted to hear that quote, him talk about the dearth of talent there, and why it's always better to draft and develop, which he's right. He's got to be better at it. But also the idea that like this goes back to the little philosophy thing. You can't just throw money at it. So Chris, it feels like hopefully we're kind of tapering. Is it tampering? Tempering? Hopefully we're properly lowering and adjusting, let's use that, expectations for the offseason for the fans to know that I really don't anticipate John just being like, our own line stinks. I'm about to ask Jody if we can spend $100 million on a new line. It just really does not feel like that's coming this offseason for reasons largely tied to a lack of supply relative to the demand and his own philosophy as a general manager.
Well said. Well, we did get a bunch of Twitter questions. Mike, are you ready to get into some of them? Because, of course, they have to do with the O-line and D-line.
Oh, yeah. Now, the Super Bowl, I'm surprised we got any other questions but O-line and D-line after what happened in the bowl.
Well, let's get it rolling here with Jeff via Blue Sky. After watching the Super Bowl, where the Eagles' defensive line dominated the best quarterback in the game, should the Seahawks prioritize building the D-line with their top draft pick to make it elite versus building the O-line to make it decent?
This is a good one. The answer is yes. Like you need both. You really do need both. And I tweeted something during the playoffs where I was just like, the playoffs are an annual reminder that if you protect the ball and you're good in the trenches, you're probably not going to lose. And that's the case. And that's the case generally every year. It just depends on how we want to see it that way. Even when the Rams won the Super Bowl, which kind of feels like not an outlier situation, but it kind of gets lost in like the Chiefs dynasty, Eagles kind of quote unquote rivalry with them thing. They're like, oh, the Rams snuck one in there. Even then, I kept picking them to win every game in that playoff run. It was like, well, they have Aaron Donald. Like, push comes to shove, if they need a stop, I believe that number 99 is going to win. And that's the case. And he did, to win the NFC Championship game and to close out the Super Bowl, right? Like pressure burst pipes, in both cases. So, yes, that should obviously be the takeaway. You can't just have that. Like, I think it is a little bit of an oversimplification to mention that the Philly won just because they had the trenches. Their secondary was very good. Their receivers are very good. Their running back is very good. Their quarterback is good. Like, their whole team is loaded. But where they have the edge over other teams who are similarly talented, if there are any, is that they can, like, the trenches is like the tiebreaker. I mean, that's where I think stands out. Like, for instance, I would say, we haven't talked about this, Chris, but I thought the two best rosters in the NFL this year were the Eagles and the Ravens. Do you have a different team before I continue that point? If you think someone else is better,
I would say the Niners were right there until what happened.
Yeah, they got banged up quite a bit. All right, so we got
yeah.
You could throw the Niners in there too. So for the sake of this discussion, I will say
the Lions too. I lied. The Lions too.
Yes, the Lions too. I think that the Eagles and Ravens was a good one for me because the Ravens roster was really loaded too. And when those two teams played, like, it was very clear to me which team was better. And now Justin Tucker kind of did his thing in the wrong direction in that game, I feel like too, but it just feels like the trenches, when their two teams are equal, the trenches tend to be the tiebreaker. And sometimes your quarterback can be the tiebreaker too. I feel like that's the case with the Chiefs when they don't have the trench advantage. Is like, oh, we have Mahomes, so he's going to take care of the ball and we'll be fine. But yes, I do feel like the takeaway should be, if we build up our O-line and our D-line, we should be straight. If I had to choose, because I think this question kind of presents as an either or, because I'm going to go O-line. Like, if I had to choose, like, it's like, hey, do I want a nasty D-line and an average O-line, or like a nasty D-line and a good O-line, or a nasty O-line and a good D-line? If those are the only options available to me, obviously I want elite both. But if those are the only options available in this scenario, yes, give me the nasty O-line. Give me the nastiest 5 fat dudes who are athletic, because I really feel like I can do whatever the hell I want. I'm going to score as many points as humanly possible on you if I have a nasty O-line.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was going to be my answer. Is I would prioritize offensive line, but actually it's a different reasoning. It's because when you look at that Seahawks D-line, I think they have 2, maybe 3 guys that can get to that all-pro level, right? I can see where, oh my gosh, he could have 10 sacks, 13 tackles for loss, forced fumbles. Byron Murphy is that type of player. That's one guy. What about Uchenna Nwosu? If he can stay healthy, I expect that production to be really, really good. Damn near all-pro. So if those 2 dudes happen to play really well, your D-line is already better just because those 2 have done their part. You got Leonard Williams, who had his best season probably as a pro last year with the Seahawks. What more could you ask for? So that's one reason why I would go with offensive line, because they just don't have any guys that are I mean, Charles Cross, solid. Abe Lucas, when healthy, really good. But to Mike's earlier point about, they just don't have that dude. They don't have a guy that's like, and I think the Seahawks D-line, there are a couple of names where you're like, okay, that guy could be a dude in the next 2-3 years. He could be somebody. Whereas the offensive line, you ain't got it yet. So I think you got to go out in the offensive line, find it, and let the defense develop. As John Schneider said, you want to develop guys. Well, let Mike Macdonald, who's a defensive guru, let him develop the linebackers and D-line, and you go out and draft an offensive lineman that can come in, be a starter, and be productive, and you can develop him as well. And okay, here we go, Mike. This is from Alejandro. When will the Seahawks trade for Cesar Ruiz? When will that be announced? He's a center for the New Orleans Saints, by the way, for listeners that might not know.
Yeah, we got a couple questions about like the trading for some of the Saints offensive linemen, Eric McCoy, Ruiz. I think McCoy is their center, Ruiz is their guard. I
Okay.
think. But either way, the answer is the same. There's just nothing. I love that this is in there, but that this goes to John's point. Teams aren't just trading, giving away offensive linemen. Like I forget the GM's name, Mickey Loomis, I think, is, GM for the Saints. If John call Mickey, my man, what up, dog? "Oh, what's up, John? How you doing? Yo, man. So look about the O line. Click. That's it. That's the end of the combo. That's it. You not you're not giving these boys up, man. And I think that's not just the Saints. That's probably every team, but in particular, I would say to the Saints because um, I don't get the sense that they're like on this like, oh, let's just blow this thing up, have a fire sale. A, that's just not how they get down. B, if you really listen to the Saints podcast, but if you dive into their books, if they have a fire sale, they actually don't save that much money by giving away these guys. So they would not clear up their books really, at least for this year. And they probably wouldn't get great picks for them anyway. So, but really the bigger issue is what John alluded to is like, yo, when GMs call each other, they don't even talk about it. They don't even talk about it. You know why? Because there's a dearth of talent at the position. And yeah, it is Mickey Loomis. So yeah, I think John called Mickey, like, oh, what up, man? Hey, how you doing, John? How's the kids? Blah, blah. How's the wife? Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, man. So yeah, I'm trying to grab some offensive linemen. Like, yeah, John, me too. Me too, buddy. So no, you can't have any of my guys. And that's just kind of how it goes. It's very rare. Teams are giving up competent offensive linemen right now. And I really feel like, in particular this year, it feels like the interior got highlighted a lot more. It feels like, I think we've said this before, but every team that lost can probably attribute a great deal of it to not being able to block up in the interior in particular, like Chargers, Steelers. There was Texans, Vikings. That's not every team, but like more than half of the teams that lost in the playoffs probably looking back at their interior O line, being like, "Huh, we got to get better." And that's before we even count the other teams like that didn't make the playoffs, like the Seahawks. So, yeah, I doubt this question was about the Saints, but I doubt there's going to be any teams that are like gung ho about like, yeah, I give up my interior alignment. I got a bunch of those. No one has that.
This next one is from Phil Birnbaum. Would you rather address the offensive line through free agency or through the draft?
Well, the answer is both. The answer is both. So, like for instance, like the Gabe Jackson trade I mentioned before, that actually wasn't that bad. I think that was like a good idea. He was a veteran dude. I forget how old he was. Doesn't matter because offensive lineman can play for a little bit. They sent over a late pick, gave him a bag. Thought he was a capable player. He had been a capable player. I think where was he at the Raiders? I think like yeah, that was fine. But also I really feel like Chris, we've joked for years here. We've joked for years, and it feels like as the years go on, we're getting closer to this happening. A GM is really just going to use every pick he has on linemen one of these days, and it's gonna make sense. It's gonna like get written about it, talked about. Maybe not literally every pick, maybe like 7 out of like a year that a guy has like 9 picks. He takes like 7 linemen. And you know what? That's freaking brilliant. You absolutely should do that. I think yes, it's got to be both. But I really think the draft is where you're gonna. I think is where you're gonna have the highest ceiling on guys, like you mentioned, like, and it's gonna be ceiling relative to contract too. Because like some guys can be all pro, like you mentioned, Chris, but probably you have to pay them accordingly. To your point about Saltawa or even Christian Haynes, you're talking about guys who are on 3rd round pick contracts. Saltawa was a 6th round pick. If those guys pop, even if they're not all pro, even if they're just starting caliber offensive linemen, like Trey Smith. Trey Smith is the right guard for the Chiefs. Trey Smith was a 6th round pick. He is about to get generational wealth this offseason if he's willing to sign somewhere else. And that's as a 6th round pick. So if you can even get that out of the draft, you are just really cooking. It's the same way the Seahawks built the Legion of Boom. Really, you get Brandon Browner from Canada, Sherman the 5th, Cam in the 5th, and yes, you have a blue chipper in Earl who was the first round pick. But like you build your O line the same way, it really hits. But then yeah, I think you can't be afraid to go do like they did with the Gabe Jackson joint, or go pay a Joe Tooney like the Chiefs did, or anytime some other linemen get paid. Brandon Scherf, I forgot to say his name, Sheriff. whatever. He got paid by, I think he left the Commanders and got paid by the Jags, or the inverse. But he was a really good player with the Commanders, or whatever they were called back then. Got paid by the Jags. That's fine. Like, I think you can do both, but I think the meat and potatoes of your line got to be, it has to be the draft, and then you just kind of supplementing in free agency. Like, okay, 3 of our guys are good, like Chris said. Let's say 3 of our guys are good. Okay, let's find another guard though. Let's cash out. Let's cash out for a guard. Or let's say our guards are good. We're gonna draft a tackle because we got a high pick. Okay, we need to spend a bag on a center because our center stinks. Like, I think you're maybe plugging a spot, not necessarily like, okay, we can only build our line one way or the other. But I think the draft, you do both, but the draft has to be the meat and potatoes of it.
I think you're on the money there, Mike.
Was that the one where they asked about potential targets too?
Yeah, that was gonna be the second part, but I thought maybe you might
yes.
get to it. So
No. Go ahead.
Potential targets, Mike. What you got, man? That are realistic as well.
Yeah, so the free agent class is not great, right? Like, the more I watch these guys, I keep coming back to names like Aaron Banks on the 49ers, which is kind of underwhelming. Ben Bradenson, who for the Bucks, who I like. That's probably my favorite of the realistic. I'm not huge on Tevin Jenkins from the Bears, not huge on Will Hernandez from the Cardinals. I also think the Cardinals should probably just keep Will Hernandez, honestly, for the reasons we're talking about. I'm gonna throw one in here we haven't talked about. I don't think. Now, mention the Saints aren't having a fire sale. I will preface this by saying I don't think the Browns are either. Fire sale, I mean, they're just like, okay, clearance rack, everything must go type of situation, because these people want to keep their jobs. So, I think if the Browns do that, like trade Miles or whatever, they're gonna get fired. I think they're gonna get fired either way, but it's in the Browns podcast. I bring that up to say, if the Browns were to like, all right, Miles, we'll trade you because we got an offer we can't refuse. I think it was Denzel Ward who said something like, hey man, if they out here just trading guys, they'll get me out of here too. I do think that's going to be some type of ripple effect with some of the veterans on the team. We're like, yo, Miles ain't the only one who want to win. So we're just shipping guys out. Ship me out too. I think their guard, Joel, let me see how you say his last name. Batonio? Let's go with that. I think he's on the older side, been all pro, been Pro Bowler. But I think if they do get in a fire sale situation where they're like, okay, Miles, you can go. We're going to reset. Denzel Ward, you can go if you want to bounce too. Joel, do you want to go too? Cool. Let's send him over to Seattle. Like, that's when he's not a free agent guy. I don't consider that super likely, but in the event that you do have a fire sale in Cleveland, I do like that as an option. Just as like an insert plug, we're good. Don't need you to develop nothing. Just do what you've been doing. I like that. And if I think Kevin Zeitler of the Lions is on the older side, let's see, like 34, 35. Don't love that. But at this point, if you're trying to win right now, I think that's worth it. And Chris, I think I've come down to, this may change as we get some more people to talk draft with us. But I think in the draft, I've really just kind of fell in love with like 2 guys that I think will be realistic. I think a man from Texas, Kelvin Banks, and then the kid from Bama, Tyler Booker. I just feel like both dudes, John, don't need to overthink that. If they're there at 18, I know you ain't really taking a true guard. I don't think ever in the first round. I think when he took James Carpenter and Ifedi, they were both with the thought to play tackle. All right, cool. You haven't done it. Clearly what you're doing, John, doesn't work. Do something else. I think both of those dudes, you take them, you put them at guard, left or right, doesn't matter. There's your answer. Those are my 2 favorites. There's some late round guys too, which would be fine. I think if they took the kid from West Virginia, Wyatt something, the North Dakota State kid that was tearing it up at the Senior Bowl, Gray Zabel, I think is how you say his last name. Kid from LSU, Miles Frazier, I think is his last name. There's some day 2 guys that I like, but I really feel like this has got to be the year that John's like, yo, man, if you say you don't want to pay for them, you say that there's a lack of them that on the trade block. For me, I hear that. I only see one other option, draft. Sure. It seems very obvious. It's so weird how John comes to his conclusions of just like, all right, no one will trade me for linemen because everyone needs linemen. You can't really just throw money at the problem in free agency because that's bad. Well, then, John, there's really only can head one way here to fix this thing. Like, this is very simple. So Those are some of the guys like a free agency. I like the draft class a lot more though. I'm much more higher on the draft class than I am on the free agent class so far. But if Joel comes available and via trade, I would like that too.
This next one, speaking of the draft, is from DK Wookie. What if Jalen Walker is there at 18, the linebacker? Would you do it? Imagine Mike using both Jalen and Spoon to cause maximum damage.
You scared me there because I thought we got a question from DK.
Sorry.
I was like, yo, have you seen any clips of this kid? Jalen, or is it Jalen or Jalen Walker?
Mr. Walker.
Yeah, Jalen. Well, you can't do that because I think there's another kid in the same. The other Georgia kid got the same last name as him.
Oh God.
Yeah. Oh no. His name's I think it's like Michael Williams or something.
We'll go with JNW.
Yeah. Either way, I know what they're talking about. Have you seen anything on this kid though? He looks.
I haven't yet. Is he?
Yeah, man.
Pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So you would just move Tyrese Knight out the way.
So actually, this kid, he plays both, but I would play him on the edge. I would play him on the edge.
Okay.
Yeah, but he's done both. His value in the first round will be on the edge, I think. But yeah, I just don't like. I feel like if a guy is a tweener, like if those are his two skill sets, like inside linebacker versus outside linebacker, he can do both. I feel like he's going to have more value to your team trying to rush the passer. I think Michael Parsons was very similar in that he did both at like Penn State, and it was like, oh, he's a freak athlete. Let's have him rush the passer. He could be more impactful there. Another example that kind of worked against a guy, but like KJ Wright was kind of like a tweener coming out of Mississippi State. So when he got to the Senior Bowl, they were like, "Hey man, you should rush the passer. You tall, got these long arms. You're a good athlete." And KJ was like, "Well, I don't do that though." And it kind of didn't work out. So he stayed an inside linebacker. But I bring that up to say I can see why that thought happened with the coaches at the Senior Bowl, where they were like, "Dude, you really want to like feed your family an olive branch? Put your hand in this dirt, you're gonna make a bag." Now he figured out get that bag otherwise. But yeah, I think if you do that, to answer this question, you do it and put him on the edge. I really think, to your point, Chris, their D line is good, but I'm not opposed to making it like better, because the reality is, since they traded Frank, an edge rusher has not had 10 sacks for the Seahawks. That's a long time, dog. Not had 10 sacks.
And that's edge rusher. So don't be jumping in Mike's DMs. Leonard Williams, he ain't an edge rusher.
No. Yeah. Leonard's good. Leonard's 300 pounds.
I know, but someone might go over their head and be like, "What do you mean? Leonard had 10." It's like, yeah, he's a DT. He plays everywhere, but he's a defensive tackle. Continue.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And so it's like, I like Boye. I like Chenna. I actually love D Hall. This is random, but as I've watched more like edge rushers and stuff in the league and in college, I think I've become more of a fan of the power guys versus the speed guy. Obviously, you want someone who could do both, but like the guys who can just put their arm on a dude's chest and just walk him backwards. That's my preferred pass rusher style now. That's neither here nor there. But I say that to say that's why I like D Hall, because D Hall is just as strong as an ox. Like he's just very classically country strong. Love it. He just has the whole country guy aesthetic too. Drives a big old truck. Anyway, I like D Hall. I like Chenna. I like Boye. But like, if you can get someone who's like, all right, cool, you might be our like 10 sack guy. That's really what they need. If they see that in one of these edge guys, whether it's the kid from Marshall, there's a few. But yeah, I'm perfectly fine with doing that. Even if one of those guards is on the board, I will say that, because I just think that's just as impactful too, though. Getting a guy who can get you 10 sacks.
This next one is from the Big Ginge. Are there any free agent big names that you'd like to see join the Seahawks, excluding offensive linemen?
Yeah, I'm not Chris, this is unfortunate for this. Not unfortunate, but this might be like the year of the receiver. I feel like teams can you can really get some plug and play receiver help this offseason. Whether it's a T. Higgins but like, I really think the older guys who have like demanded trades or about to get cut or whatever can really help. Like, I think Debo's a little washed, but I do think Debo can be effective. Like, Debo's asked for a trade. I had a list. I lost it. Cooper Kupp. I still think if Tyler gets released, he can help a team. I think Chris Godwin's contract coming up. I think D-Hop's up again. I do think like if you need like just you don't need a number one. Like if you're a team like the Cowboys, for instance, like okay, you have a one. Clearly it's CD, but you just need a two. I feel like there's a lot of good. This is the year to need a two. And that would be really cool. The Seahawks don't, so that's unfortunate for them. A name, a non to give you guys a non was it a non O line name? I think was
Yep.
the parameter for the question. Okay, one I like is Jair Alexander. Actually, he hasn't played a ton for the Packers in recent years. Been really banged up. He's kind of their Jamal Adams, so to speak, in terms of like, man, he's good, but he's just not on the field. I use Jamal because he's a DB, but if the Packers get rid of him, and I think ESPN just has something saying that like they probably could because they kind of just pissed that he ain't available. He, I think, would be like a post June 1 release. I don't think that's a trade situation because of the way his contract is structured. I'd love that. I would take a flyer on that because of he's a ceiling raiser if you can get him out there. Obviously, that's a huge if. But if you can get him out there, I think it could be what Hassan Reddick was when the Eagles picked him up. I forget where Hassan was before that, Carolina or Arizona. But like it was like a perfect addition for that Philly team that went to the Super Bowl in 2022. A better example, perhaps more apt for this discussion because I picked a DB, is James Bradbury. I believe James Bradbury was a decent player with the Giants, and he was a cap casualty of the Giants, I believe, and got picked up by the Eagles and was like second team All-Pro on one of the best teams in the league, and they ended up going to the Super Bowl. Now, obviously, James cost him the Super Bowl a little bit, but the point is that that's the type of guy you get, similar to like to a lesser degree what the Eagles just got with like Zach Bond. Zach Bond wasn't really doing nothing with the Saints special teams guy, barely. You go pick him up, take a flyer on him, all pro linebacker. Obviously the injuries are a concern, but I that would be like one of my like sneaky favorite moves if they were able to do it. I'd have to dive a little bit more into see like the scheme fit with what Mike Macdonald wants to do, but ultimately I kind of view Jair as one of those guys like he can cover, so I don't care about anything else. Like he's just been good for so long when healthy that I'm not tripping off a scheme fit for real. It's like I know that if you line up him and say, "Hey, bro, I need you to cover, dude. It's 3rd and 11. We need to play." He'll go make it. That's kind of how I view him. So he would probably be my sneaky, quote unquote, big name. Not really a free agent, but could be a free agent type of signing that isn't on the offensive line.
Mike, you talked a little bit about wide receivers, just briefly, just because you mentioned that this might be the year where wide receivers land on different rosters and the Seahawks. Okay. If Ty Lockett's out, you got DKJSN. What next? So this is from Mookie Alexander. How high of a priority do you think the wide receiver position will be for the Seahawks in this draft?
Yeah, I thought about this when I was making my mock draft, which is out on The Athletic. Chris, I'm not a fan of this, but I actually don't think it's going to be that high of a priority. Because of some of the stuff that Clint talked about with like just how the scheme kind of works in general, but then also wanting to be in heavy personnel, 12, 21. Like if you got DK and JSN, and if you extend DK, which they should, you've got, let's say they give DK another 3-year deal. So they can be under contract for like a 3-year extension. So he'll be under contract for 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028. 2028. Jackson, with his 5th-year option, would be under contract through 2027, I think, right? So you've got those guys under contract at least together in this scenario for like 3 years, right? When you have that and they're both under 30, I think you live in that world and like, all right, we're good. Now, obviously, we need depth. You can't just have 2 guys for 20 games, it's just thinking you're going to play in the Super Bowl. But just the idea like, okay, we're good. We don't need, like before the Seahawks they were living in this 11 personnel world. So you needed to draft a D. Eskridge. The thought process, I'll say this to the death of me. I don't think the thought process behind drafting D was bad. You lived in 11 personnel world, you needed a 3rd receiver. That's fine. Same way it wasn't bad to draft Jackson. You live in an 11 personnel world, you needed a 3rd guy. It's not a dumb thing to do that. But now if you're going to start living in this 12 personnel world, 21 personnel world, heavy personnel world, then no, I don't think it'll be much of a priority. I think if they release Tyler and don't resign him, I think you can find depth and or what else you need for Clint's scheme, 4th round, late 3rd after a trade back. Again, I mentioned the free agent receivers, or the trade market on receivers is good. And the trade market, not to say they'll go trade for Debo or Cooper Kupp or whatever, but or even Tyreek Hill, who could be on the market too. I don't think they go get these guys, but I think that like this trickle down effect. If you get all this movement up at the top, you get good players who are still available towards the bottom. So yeah, I actually don't think it'll be a high priority. At least that's how I feel like February. Maybe that can change after I talk to some people. But yeah, I'd be surprised if they took like a 1st round receiver, 2nd round receiver. I'd be surprised if they cashed out for a receiver. I think what they need, which is really just speed, they could find anywhere. Yeah, like you can go find a kid from give me a small school. You go find a kid from, I think the HBCU combine is happening as we're recording right now. Go find some kid from some HBCU who runs a 4.3. See if we can run go routes. There you go. There's your guy. Draft him in the 6th round. And you can rock. Like I think it's an important position still, but not something that you gotta allocate a lot of resources to based on what the Seahawks want to do now with Clint.
This next one is from Adrian Sacco. Is there a quarterback you like in the draft to develop?
Oh boy. Chris, have you looked at the quarterbacks lately?
I'm not going to lie to you. I haven't yet. But when you said, oh boy, that leads me to believe that you've read some stuff, seen some stuff, and you're like, I'm good.
Yeah. So I was watching a lot during the I was watching a lot of college quarterbacks during just whenever I could on Saturdays and stuff this year. Mostly I was trying to watch Cam to see how he did, in Miami, former Coug. And then Shador and all that was interesting too. I'm looking around, I'm like, oh boy, this is not a great. I'm not feeling it. I do think there is like some guys who can fit really well in like a specific spot. But I'm not feeling as much as like even like last year. I feel like there were just bigger arms last year. I feel like there's some accurate dudes here, but not as much. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of great athletes in this one at the position either. So I'm not like a huge fan really. Outside of like obviously if the Seahawks were to get like Cam Ward, oh that's great, or Shador, yeah, that's great. Even Milroe, he's probably my favorite of the like outside of Cam and Shador, who I just consider unrealistic for like the Seahawks. Jalen is probably the one where I'm like, man, I see it. I see an elite trait or two, I see that he can launch it. Not super strong like the Joe Milton kid from last year, who's on the Patriots now, but like he can launch it. And his athleticism is probably the best individual trait of any of these quarterbacks. Like outside of, I would maybe say Shador's accuracy is probably maybe number 1, and then like 1B is probably Jalen's athleticism. Because that dude, I feel like you can build a whole, like the Seahawks used to do with Russ in the zone read, like, or how the Eagles were doing with the younger Jalen, or how the Colts are doing with Anthony Richardson now. Like I feel like you can just kind of, or Lamar, young Lamar, even Lamar now, you can kind of build a whole run game and a whole offense around that if you give them time. You got to give them time. This is definitely a give them time class. I'm not seeing anyone outside of the top 2, and even then it's kind of shaky. Pop. But if I had to pick one, that would be my guy, Jalen. And after that, Chris, it gets kind of shaky. It just it does, and it really, what really sucks is I feel like there are some guys, but I don't see the Seahawks as a QB friendly offense, at least not yet. I think the best version of Kubiak's scheme is very quarterback friendly, but we just haven't seen it. Because I feel like if it was more QB friendly, for instance, there are some quarterbacks, if they went to other spots, I think they'd be great. Not great, but be like serviceable. Like if Kyle McCord, the Syracuse kid, went to Detroit, I think there's some potential there. If Will Howard, the Ohio State kid, went to the Dolphins, I think there's like some potential there where there's like these are some QB friendly offenses. Like, okay, these guys help a little bit. I feel like a really good example of this that we've seen in recent years is like Chris, you've seen Malik Willis play. Not for the Packers, but before he got to the Packers, with the Titans. It was awful.
Yeah.
It was awful. Absolutely awful. He had to play in a few times this year for the Packers and looked perfectly fine. Now, he didn't look like a star, but he didn't look like, as you would say, buns or cheeks or any version of just a buttocks. Like, he didn't look like that. He looked perfectly fine. He had a game-winning touchdown, I think, one of those games. Like, he looked fine. And he's a perfect example of a give-him-time guy. I don't think Malik's a starter in this league, but, like, in the right setup in a QB-friendly offense, after having a few years in the league, he looked fine. I feel like that's what this draft is, a bunch of better Malik Willis's outside of, like, a couple guys. So, yeah, if I had to pick one, probably go with Jalen because of what you can do with him in the run game. And I feel like that's the best high-end trait of all the, like, non-top 2 guys.
This next one's from Lukey Rex. Kubiak's scheme is built around the outside zone run game. That sets up play action. Sounds great. What if the run game and O-line is bad as it was last season?
Because why did somebody come in with the doom and gloom question?
Because the reality of the situation is they could be bad again. But go ahead, Mike.
That is reality. The answer is they'd be bad. The thing about outside zone, any run scheme really, but outside zone, it's not like, to my knowledge. Now I haven't talked to any offensive linemen about this specifically, but in all of my years of talking to offensive linemen, there hasn't really been anything that's come up to let me know, and I could be wrong, obviously, that outside zone is like inherently easier to run for linemen. It just requires different skill sets, getting guys on the move a little bit more than like some of the gap stuff. But yeah, I don't necessarily think that just switching to that scheme will make the Seahawks a better run team. Like, they tried some of that stuff with Grubb too. It just didn't work. Grubb was trying everything for what it's worth. He was trying inside zone, outside zone, mid zone, gap stuff, counter, power, pin pull. He's trying everything. Like, he didn't even hit on, what was the one he kept hitting on with the Cardinals in that second
counter.
Kept running counter. He was like, this works. We're just gonna keep running it. And it just kind of didn't hit like that ever again. Because it just kind of worked that one day. And what was he running against the Jets? Was he just running power?
Inside zone and a little bit of power too. It's inside zone though for sure.
Yeah, against the Jets, he was just like, okay, buddy, here goes this B gap. It's ours today. And it's just like he was trying to find something that worked and it didn't really stick. So yeah, I think the idea is theoretical, but there's no guarantee that it works better. That said, we've seen some of the linemen in this scheme have that work. Like Abe and Charles looked great running zone stuff their rookie year. I went back and watched a lot of Ken Walker's zone runs from his rookie year. Boy, he was killing it. Like, it can work. I really think now I can see what Mike Macdonald and John's thinking. Chris, I see this world where if they just like are only marginally better up front in the run game, Ken looks like Saquon did this year. Maybe not 2,000 yards, but like, I see the same home run ability. We've talked about this. Ken is one of probably what did we decide on? Like 8 running backs who can score from anywhere on the field. I haven't moved on that thought. Like, you give Ken that crease, he can go. And they have some of the old linemen to do it. They just need more. But yeah, this question, you're right. They could easily just suck at that scheme. They could. It really comes down to how well Clint can teach it and how well his O-line coach can teach it. Looks like they're going to hire a run game analyst or run game coach or whatever. It doesn't really matter. They just got to be able to teach it. That's it. Because there's not like some foolproof run scheme that like works for everybody. If that was the case, everyone will be running it. No, you have to have the guys that can execute it and then set up the play action. Because if it doesn't work, you look like the Saints looked. Weren't the Saints like one of the worst offenses in the league this year? Yeah, they were. So it can look like that theoretically if your guys don't block it right.
This next one is from Hawk Strolager. Would you rather see the Seahawks use a dedicated fullback this season or a bunch of different 12-21 personnel looks using tight ends as the fullback duties?
Where are you on fullbacks, Chris? Are you a fullback guy?
I don't mind it, but I also think A.J. Barner would be fine if you put him in the backfield as a fullback. I thought he showed his ability to block. I'm not mad at the Seahawks say we're going to get a guy that is a fullback, but I don't mind just throwing A.J. Barner back there and be like, hey, bro, it's 3rd and 1. Go take out a linebacker. Go take out a safety. Go crack a DN. Go clear space for Ken to explode. Totally fine with that. So either or for me. I know, Mike, you've mentioned this on a couple other pods that you like just seeing a linebacker out there, the neck roll, whatever they got going on. You
Yeah,
just like that
man.
gritty play. So, hey, AJ, if you want to get a neck roll, I would be happy to have you as the Seahawks fullback. But go ahead, Mike.
No, man, you're right, man. I'm becoming a meathead football guy in this way. Because there's not, I don't, it's one of those things that it doesn't make sense. Like, I have no analytics, no numbers to back this up. But I just feel like if you get one of those guys who looks like a fullback, that's like, I just need him to look like a fullback. It makes your offense tougher. And if he has a fullback name too, then it's even better. So I feel like there are a few fullback names. The ones are like, the first one is just like real short, like the full name is like 10 letters, like a guy named like John Beck. I feel like it's like a fullback name. So I need a guy who looks like a fullback and has a fullback name. And I think the other type of fullback names are guys with like a foreign name, like they have like Will Tufuaku, something like that. Like, okay, he is clearly a fullback. Or the Patriots had a guy who was like that. They had him in the game. They lost to the Seahawks with Cam Newton. I think his name looked normal, but it wasn't. I think his name was like, it looked like Jacob, but I think he's like German or something like that. And it's really like Jakob or something like that. Like that, though. That type of player, I feel like makes your offense tougher. I have nothing to back that up, nothing to support it, but I just love it. Yeah, I think his name was like Jakob Johnson or something like that. I think he's one of the like international pathway guys, I think. But either way, I need one of them guys. I've thought about this question before we even got it. That's the side of the fence I'm on. I want a full-on meathead. Don't care whether he touches the ball, just neck roll, old school face mask. Hell, wear a leather helmet. Get a guy in a leather helmet out there and just put him. I want him out there 50% of the time. That's what I'm coming to. I just really that's where I've gone to, because I really think it just helps with the aesthetic and the identity. I feel like you just can't. It's harder. Don't say it's impossible. It's harder to be like a team that's like not tough and not a football team that runs well when you have that guy. And I think that the only example I've seen of a team that's like perceived to not be tough that uses a fullback is the Dolphins. Like, it's kind of a soft team, but they use the hell out of Alec Ingold, I think is their fullback's name. So they're like the exception. But even then, the Dolphins are a very good running football team. So yes, I'm full on. I want a traditional. If you're going to lean all the way into this, I'm not even sure like this is the offense they should be running. But if they're going to run it, give me a guy. He has to have a fullback name. He needs to have an ugly ass football number like 47 or something like that, 49, 46. He needs to have the ugliest number possible, a fullback name, just body type of a fullback, meathead, blah, 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 loves violence. That's the guy. They not only do I want them to have, they need it. They will not be successful. What day is it? It's mid-February. Write this down. They will not be successful unless they get one of these guys. That's exactly what they need to make the offense work.
This next one is from D'Artagnan. During the Drew Lock Geno training camp battle to be the starter, I remember you guys saying on the pod how bad they looked. When and what changed with Geno? I remember that too. We was out there watching them throw just incomplete passes, sailing passes. It was bad.
No, it was not good. That said, as Chris can attest, I always believed in Geno. I did.
Lost money
I
on
was
that
very
guy.
yes. I was very confident in Geno. Chris was very confident in Mr. Locke. Neither one of them looked great. That's true. That's what made the 2022 season so weird, because it was like we were all kind of like trying to write and express like, oh wow, look, Geno's really turned it on, and Geno kept being like, I've been like this, and we can't just get up there and be like, no, you haven't. But it was like, no, you haven't. It's like we saw, we was there. Geno had been on the team at that point till 2022 season, right? So he got signed in 2019. So I think he battled with, I forget who the backup was in 2018, but like 2019 he was in a camp battle. I want to say with like I can't remember, but and then he got into one with Anthony Gordon, go Cougs. In 2021, I forgot who he was in a battle with, but like he just kept being in these. I think one of them was like Paxton Lynch, one of the battles. Like he was in legit quarterback battles. Now he kept winning them, but it wasn't like he was lighting it up, you know. So Anyway, to the point of what changed. Here's my theory. I think I've said this theory before. I think both Geno and Drew, particularly Geno, were playing very risk averse. I think part of that is because that's what the offense was designed to be. Very risk averse. They were heavy personnel, I think, back then with Shane. We're trying to be a team that like ran it, play action, kind of what Kubiak trying to do now, to be honest. That's the team they were trying to be. Very safe, very go out there and don't lose us the game type of quarterback stuff. And I think in particular, that's not Geno's game. And I can see how Geno was in that bag in that competition and even the first couple of games of the season, and even as Russ's backup. Because when you are the backup, that's generally your job. Hey, man, such and such rolled his ankle. Go out there, make sure we don't lose, assuming you're not getting blown out, right? And that's just not Geno's game. Geno's game is not go out there and just like play not to win, play scared. You gotta let that Geno can spin. You gotta let him spin. Because you remember that preseason, Chris. I don't even think Geno did even. I don't even think he threw a touchdown pass in the preseason. I'm pretty sure he didn't. Like he didn't go out there and wow it. He just made fewer mistakes than Drew, who threw multiple picks. I think he lost a fumble. Like Drew was Drew. You know, highs and lows. Drew did throw a touchdown pass or two, but he turned it over as well. I don't think Geno had any turnovers. All his passes were accurate. Guys had a bunch of drops, but he didn't throw any, he didn't do anything to lose the job. And I think that was all part of the offense and the philosophy. And you guys remember a couple games in, I think after they lost to the Niners, like 27-7 or something like that. Didn't score at all on offense, I think, in that game. I think their only touchdown was a Mike Jack. Either Mike Jack or who ran the blocked field goal back? It was either Mike Jack or Tariq. You remember that down in the Bay? It was like, I think it was Mike Jack. They blocked the field goal, ran it back. It was their only points, I think. I think after that game, Pete was like, we need to let Geno cook, essentially. And I think that's really what changed for Geno. I'm just getting inside Geno's head. He's never told me this or anything, but like, I think it was the idea of his coach being like, hey, bro, you can spin. You want to go spin? And Geno's probably like, God damn it, coach. I've been waiting on you to ask me that for 4 years, man. Yeah, let me go spin. And I think the next game they lost to the Falcons, actually. But just the idea of like, hey, man, we don't need you to play not to lose. Go out there and win us the game, Geno. Go do that. I think that changed a lot for both of them, but mainly Geno. It was like the idea that, like, bro, you're not the backup. You ain't got to go out there and just hold it down until Russ's finger heals. You are a guy. Go win us games. And he was able to do that. I think he led the league in fourth quarter drives or something like that. I think I looked this up the other day. Geno, since he became the starter, is like second in game-winning drives, something like that, and fourth quarter comebacks. Like him, Mahomes, and like Kirk Cousins are all in top 3. I think that really helped unlock things because before Pete was playing scared money, you don't make no money, and then he was like, "Yo, that's not Geno's game. Geno got to really spin, you know." And I think that's what really helped.
This next one is from Devin Witherfork. If you had to guess, where's John Schneider and crew on Geno spectrum?
All right, Chris, you go first.
I think so. John Schneider and crew. I think they are at a point where they believe Geno is enough. Now, I also think there is a point where Mike Macdonald sees Geno as one thing and John Schneider might see Geno as another. And I don't know if those two agree on certain things, just from what I've seen John Schneider say, or not even John Schneider, what I've seen Mike Macdonald say, and just knowing and reading the behind the lines with John Schneider, seems like he just, he's like, whatever, Mike, you got it. I'll roll with your punches, but he's not really sold. So that's where I stand with it. I think John is just like, all right, man, well, we'll keep throwing him out there. If he's going to do something, we'll see what happens. But I think Mike is more influenced and believes in Geno more than John Schneider, dare I say, if that makes sense.
That definitely makes sense. No. That last part is it right there.
Should have just led with that.
That's all right. Sometimes the last thing that people hear is the thing that sticks with them the most. So you got to make that the strongest. I keep that in mind when I write my stories too. Anyway, I think that more important than what John has said is what he's done. Money talks. Money talks. You could see it in the two. I think that the two contracts that really Geno's contract and Daniel Jones's contract from that offseason stood out. It really did. The Giants believed in Daniel Jones more strongly than the Seahawks believed in Geno Smith. Geno's deal was essentially it was like a 3-year deal that was effectively a bunch of 1-year deals that just kind of rolled over. Essentially, that's an oversimplification, but that's not inaccurate. It was basically like, yo, I rock with you, but only if you just keep doing what you were doing. That's it. But I'm not sure you'll keep doing what you're doing. That's why there's all these like contract escalators in your contract in your deal. Whereas Daniel Jones, not only did he get like $40 million a year, he got the first 2 years of that guaranteed. And both of them to that point had only had one good year of production. Daniel Jones looked like unplayable for the first like few years of his deal, which is why they didn't pick up his 5th year option. And then he balled out, air quotes, guys. Sorry, that's not true. But he played well in that 2022 season with Brian Daboll. And they made the playoffs. I think they won like 13 games, something like that. And he got paid. He got paid with a stronger commitment. I think he had to fire his agent to get it, but he got a stronger commitment from the Giants than the Seahawks gave Geno. And I always thought that was more telling than anything John could say. I agree with you, though. His words probably kind of feel like that, too. Like he views Geno as very bridgy. But I feel like the contract is the loudest part of all that. Because that's a bridgy contract. And it didn't have to be. That's why I use Daniel Jones as an example. Now, Daniel's younger than Geno, but I think it's still relevant. Because even then, like you look at older guys who have gotten extensions, like Goff is getting bags from Detroit. Stafford, they got no problem usually paying him or reworking his deal or whatever, just feeling committed to him to obviously win a Super Bowl. But you don't have to, I bring those guys up to say, you don't have to just basically say, they give him like an if-then contract. If you do this, then we'll pay you like that. Not, we know you're going to do this, so we're paying you accordingly up front, which is how contracts usually work. It's, I'm paying you like a top 10 quarterback because I believe that while you were under the terms of this deal, that is what you will be. No, it was like, I think you could be. And if you are, then you get paid accordingly. That's not believing in someone. That's not believing in someone's your guy. That's the definition of a bridge situation. It's like, yeah, I'm investing in you until I find something better. Like you said, they think he's enough. Now that was a few years ago. Has that changed? I am not inclined to think so, really. I would not be surprised. I would be surprised. I should phrase that differently. I would be surprised if his next deal is not a version of the same thing. Now, age factors into this now. Geno is 34, turns 35 in October. So age factors in a little differently than the last negotiation, but the sentiment, I'm sure, will be the same in the contract. We believe in you. If you perform like this, then we will pay you like this. Now, Geno's probably like, I'm tired of that. Go ahead and pay me, which I would agree with him. But I would be surprised if his deal is not like a big deal by numerical value, like a 3-year, whatever the hell, 100 million, whatever. That really is, when you get into the nuts and bolts of it, is a 1 year with a bunch of guarantees and then stuff that rolls over next year if he plays well or if he's just on the roster or whatever. I just think that's I feel like that's kind of a John thing. Not to say John don't think Geno's good, but yeah, I think money talks, man. I think that's I think there's probably naturally kind of, unless you're got one of those elite dudes, kind of a disconnect between the coaches and GMs, I would imagine, in some places, because like the coach has got to be he can't really go to war with you for real as the quarterback if he don't believe in you. Like Pete really you have to believe in your guy. Otherwise, you can go out there and you're just going to be like Brian Daboll, where you're just turning red every time he turns the ball over. Like, it's very clear that Brian Daboll did not believe in Daniel Jones. We could see that, and neither me nor Chris has had a conversation with Brian Daboll. We could see it on TV. Like, he did not like that guy, And when you don't believe in your guy, it's tough. And you're with him every day. You're watching all his film with him. You're seeing him in practice. The GM, it's his job to look at everyone else. It's his job to go look at options. And it's very easy to get enamored with those options, So I can get how not everyone will be aligned, but yeah, I think that money is the main indicator really in this business. Guarantees, blah, blah, blah. If you really believe in a dude, like you'll pay accordingly, you'll structure the contract accordingly. And they didn't do that. And I'd be surprised if they do that this time. I don't think they will. But I still think Geno will be QB1. But like I'm agreeing with you, Chris. I think they think he's bridgy, real bridgy, and they're probably going to give him another bridgy contract that reflects that.
We got two more, Mike. This next one is from Ryan Katz. Do you think that Clinic Mike's comments this past week signal DK? He ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, I'm trying not to, because we're in the content business too. I don't want to shade none of our people that, I'm cool with people in the media. But I do feel like this is really just like the DK trade thing. Is really just like a Twitter/radio construction. I haven't heard anything ever to suggest that it's even been like talked about with sincerity. I'm sure they talk about everything, but like talked about with sincerity, that any calls have been made, offers have been discussed. I haven't got no indication. If somebody else has and reported it locally, cool. But I haven't even heard that. It really just feels like every year it's a Twitter thing and a radio thing. It's like, yep, they got to get rid of DK. Here's what they could get. And I'm just like, where is this coming from? I was arguing with people about this on Twitter like a month ago. I was just like, no, I'm not going to rehash the Twitter thing, but it does feel like, Chris, it just comes from us, media, or even just on social media versus like actual substance, like a trade request or some rumblings, it's one thing if like Ian Rappaport floats it out there. They took some calls. Well, okay, then, yeah. And we talk about that's how things work. Or Schefter, or even Diana Rossini, who works with me at The Athletic, or whoever, Albert Breer, doesn't matter. Even Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk. I feel like we never really get that. Maybe I missed one. I don't know, but I feel like we don't get that. It feels like every year it's just like something randomly speculative on radio or TV, or like bunch of fan tweets asking us if they should do. I've never really got that. So yes, I think Clint and Mike's comments suggest that, but I don't even need to hear that from them. Every DK and Geno, it feels like we're getting to that Jamal Adams space where the gap between the thought about them inside the building versus outside the building is just widening. You know how that was with Jamal, Chris? Like,
Yep.
Fans thought he was like the worst player ever, even healthy, just the worst player ever. And then inside the building, players, coaches, they were like, nah, bro, he's nice, like very good, It's same thing with like Geno. Everybody who watches Geno, coach, players, they be like, oh man, no, Geno, nice. And then if you hop on social media or listen to like TV or radio, you'd be like, man, does Geno stink? Why are they talking about getting rid of this guy? Same thing with DK. You listen to, if you just like popped in the Seahawks world and listened to a few pods or listened to some radio shows or just scrolled on social media for a little bit, you would think Geno's out there, DK's out there fumbling the ball every 2 games, punching referees in the face, and then whipping his nuts out in the locker room and pissing off his teammates. Like you would just think that he's just that he's George Pickens. And George hasn't done any of those things that I mentioned, to be clear, but you would just think he's George, like getting thrown out of every game, just being all standoffish with his teammates or whatever. Like you would think that if you just popped in the Seahawks world from afar. And I've got nothing to indicate that that's the case. Like I understand everybody got to make their content. That's fine. I don't even care that that's the case. But I feel like we should acknowledge that it's not. Like even the other day, did you see the one, Chris? I think it was like Jeremy Fowler of ESPN polled some executives. And I think someone predicted, an executive that's not with the Seahawks predicted like, oh, he might get traded to the Chargers or something like that.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I feel like that's okay. That's a random exec from another team. It's like I don't think that equates to the Seahawks like could get rid of DK. I remember one time I got aggregated like that. I think it was last offseason. I had written that if the Seahawks were to try to trade DK, they would get a first round pick. And then someone aggregated in that and said it was like the Seahawks are trying to trade DK for a first round pick. I saw it on Twitter. I scrolled the link. They were attributing it to me. I said, what? What? I didn't say that at all. So, yeah, I think it's just a creation for us to just entertain stuff because, yeah, I've never heard anything to suggest that they would want to do that. And I mean, it doesn't say they don't, I guess, but I've never seen anything, the normal rumblings of rumors, trade requests. No, it just feels like we just making it up. We need stuff to talk about. And because people don't like DK.
That's the big one. Not that many people like DK for whatever reason, but
well, I mean, we know the reasons. for real. It's just DK has that aesthetic that people just you just don't. I feel like they just get tired of it after a little bit. Like they even tired of AJ Brown over there sometimes, but now obviously they just won a Super Bowl. But
He
like,
just reading the book, man.
he just his stuff in them. Like he called into a radio station in Philly. Like he's like classic receiver diva guy. You know, they asked him what was wrong with the offense. He was like passing. You know, he's kind of that classic dude. You know, but like people just don't like that. They just don't like that aesthetic. And DK has this perception again. Like if you just popped in, Chris, we watch every game, we watch all the tape. You would think that DK all he do is fumble and punch people,
Fight, yeah.
and get flags for getting thrown. He's gotten thrown out of I think 2 games.
2 games. Packers and
the Niners when he got into it.
Fred
Lenore. Well, yeah. Started with Fred pushed him in the back of the neck, and then he ended up getting into it with DeMondre Lenore. But yes, it was with Fred. Yeah, it's just like, yeah, it's weird. It's just it's like people were focused on all the stuff that he either can't do or doesn't do or does wrong versus like accepting, like, bro, you guys got this 27-year-old, very unselfish actually, freak of nature talent, like at a premium position who wants to be here. There should be more appreciation for that. Like, how do we use DK? Not how can we get rid of him and hope that we find a guy just as good as DK? It's very weird. It's the Seahawks world is very weird about DK. I don't like it.
This last one comes from Legion of Hawks. In what ways are you able to see Mike Macdonald changing and influencing how this early part of the offseason with Schneider unfolds, as opposed to how it was with Pete Carroll?
Yeah, you know, I thought about this one for a little bit. I came to the conclusion, Chris, that I don't really think that it'll change that much. You know, I think that the urgency is still there, because that was really what stood out about back then. It was the urgency, like with Pete and John. They came in trying to win right away, and they were willing to do everything it took to, like quarterbacks in the draft, quarterbacks in free agency. Clearly, they were scouting Canada. Like they were willing to go get veterans that Pete knew, guys from USC, guys that Pete tried to recruit that he at USC that he couldn't get, that were then now in the pros. John's out here writing handwritten letters to guys during the lockout. Like, there was just an urgency of like, we want to win. Let's figure out how to do it. They're firing coaches, hiring coaches, bringing in new OCs, coordinators, whatever. Like, they were just throwing everything at the wall to try to see if it stuck. Now, obviously, it didn't all work, but eventually it did. But the common thread, I think that you can attribute to John is the urgency. John wants to win because his boss wants to win, but he wants to win too. But it really comes down to your boss. His boss wants to win, and that was reflected in how him and Pete kicked it back then. They was like, "Yo, we got to figure this out. We need to go try to get Peyton Manning. We need to go try to trade for Marshawn Lynch. We need to go trade for Percy Harvin. We need to go trade for Jimmy Graham. We need to go trade for whatever. We need to just do stuff. We need to sign edge rushers. Mike B. Trade for. I think they traded for Chris Clemens. Yeah, I think so. Like, let's trade for Leon Washington. Let's trade. Let's sign guys. Let's go pay Matt Flynn. Like, they were just, let's do whatever it takes because we want to win. And I think that within the budget that they have, I think John's always going to operate like that. It's always going to be, I want to win without, what's the word I want to use, Chris? Without being the Saints in the cap world. Like, the Saints are kind of, they're kind of screwed a little bit. Like, they're not winning nothing and they got no money. They got no cap room, I should say. They don't want to be like that. I think Philly is kind of in that space where I think they have the most money allocated to dead money, I think, in the league. But obviously they just won. So, but I think the urgency that's going to be the same. It doesn't mean that it'll work. I think John's had this same urgency for quite some time now and has won nothing. But I think that's it. And I think Mike's very similar to Pete. Mike wants to win. He wants to go out there and kick the other team's butt over and over and over again. Like, that's his bag. That's what he wants to do. He want to win. And contrary to like what some of the fan base may think of, like, oh yeah, it's going to take some time. They're hitting reset. No, man, Mike wanted to win last year, and he's going to want to win in 2025. That's like, in this league where you can't really just count on like this unless your owner greenlights it, like we saw with Dan Campbell, where the owner came out after they sucked. They were like 1-7, I think, in Dan's second year, and it was like, yo, believe in Dan. We hired the right guys. I think the owner had held a press conference, like during practice or something. Unless your owner greenlights like a slow grind like that, you kind of have to operate like, yo, we're trying to win. And Jody is definitely, to my knowledge, let John and them know, like, oh yeah, let's go out there and try to win, be the best we can be. So yeah, I don't think much. I think the urgency will stay the same. And like John, we opened the show with, philosophically, they're kicking it the same way, for better or worse. I don't know if that's good or not, but you're kicking it the same way. They're just trying to win now, just like Pete and John was 14, 15 years ago.
Well, there you have it. We appreciate all the Twitter questions, all the love and support. Fun fact, TikTok is back. So I have access. I just got to handle a few other things. Yeah, I downloaded it and it was like, hey, welcome back. I was like, oh, thank goodness, because I was locked out for the last month. So getting back on there will be nice as we get prepared for, a busy offseason with draft coming up real soon. Mine's about to head down to, where are you headed, Mike? I always
Indianapolis.
Indianapolis, thank you.
Yeah,
to go check out some new players to see if anyone can fit and match in what the Seahawks need. And we'll give you a bunch of content there. And as I mentioned, the draft, we'll have our guy Dane Brugler on and a bunch of other guests that you've seen in previous years. So that's all coming up very soon. Mike, is there anything you want to add before we get out of here?
Yeah, just appreciate the love and support. Yeah, there you go. It's like the one good thing the new presidential regime has done is get TikTok back on the app stores in America. I meant to text you about that. I saw that. So yeah, follow us on there. Seahawks Man to Man on Instagram, TikTok. Yeah, follow me on everything at Mike Dugar. We really appreciate all that love and support. Whether it's YouTube, Apple, Blue Wire, Spotify, it don't really matter where. We appreciate however you listen and consume the content, but all that extra stuff, the likes, the follows, the shares, the whatever, that means the world to us as well. So until then, catch you next time. Have a good week. Peace.